thanks everybody for joining. I think it's a good enough time to start. My name is Akshat Trivedi. I am. I have been sold as a seasoned entrepreneur. Thank you very much. I hope someday I will be or seasoned angel investor. But we have Nitin Vishwas today, who is a classmate of mine from ISB and a very successful entrepreneur. I think he would differ given how humble he is. I would
Struggling, struggling, but building, struggling and building.
case in point. I should already rest my case about what the point I was trying to make. So today we are going to talk about what someone, not Nitin, called Insurgent Brands, about how small brands are coming into the market, disrupting the entire marketplace. And we talk about Nitin's journey from being an engineer to a consultant to now an entrepreneur. What challenges he encountered, how he addressed them, and what his vision of taking the business into the future is. So, Nitin, if you would introduce yourself briefly, and then we can start the session. We'll start the questions.
Let me know if I'm not audible. So my name is Nitin. I am a classmate of Akshat from the class of 2010 ISB. Prior to ISB, worked with Larsen and Toubro, a mechanical engineer. Post ISB, spent a short stint in infrastructure before jumping into McKinsey as a consultant for 4 years. And post McKinsey, there was Abbott. So there was pharmaceuticals. So then from Dawa, I moved to Daru. And that's when we started Moonshine. So been about 5 years and a few months since the brand has gone live. And I have a co-founder with me called Rohan. And the two of us sort of have a team of about 53 people. And we're trying to build a category called Moonshine, which is a category called mead under a brand called Moonshine. So that's
And it's not beer. He's really
it's
militant about that. So please don't ever call it beer. So could you give us a little bit of context about how Larsen and Toubro, ISB, McKinsey, of course, infrastructure, and Dawa and Daru, all of them get tied together. What brought about the idea for Moonshine Meadery, and how did you arrive at the final product?
So the short answer to that question is nothing actually connects the dots here.
Okay.
Other than the fact that we have investors from every part of my life in this journey who have supported us in building this brand. I think the origin of the product, right? Before I get there, I should also sort of give a little caveat, right? So what is mead? So mead is essentially an alcohol made by fermenting honey. So just the way you would ferment grape and turn that into grape wine, or ferment barley and turn that into beer, what we do is we ferment honey and turn that into alcohol.
Okay.
And the word mead comes from the Latin word medu, which comes from the Sanskrit word madhu. So if you guys now, I think most of us have watched Devdas are familiar with the terms madhushalha and madhira, right? So the word mad, or what otherwise in the scriptures would read as somras, is essentially what we're trying to make. So we bring an ancient alcohol back into fore. The Moonshine is India's, and I believe we were also Asia's first meadery. Thankfully, over the last 5 years, we have enough people who have also gotten into the bandwagon. So the category has definitely grown. And I think as per the last count, I think there are about 8 meaderies now in India, 8 mead brands in India, and about 7 or 8 in Asia as well. China is still an unexplored area, but I believe in Southeast Asia, we have about 5 or 6 mead brands.
Okay. So that's wonderful to know. I myself didn't know that Madhu and mead had a common link there. Thanks. So could you tell us a little more about how you started, what your initial challenges were, how you got about to my apologies, how you went about finding your co-founder, and how that journey has been?
So my journey with alcohol pretty much started in a bar, like most other stories, right? So my co-founder and I, we've been friends for 36 years, and just as a reference point, we are 39 now. And when I say friends, I mean every cake cutting that I've done since I was 3, I've had Rohan standing in the photograph next to me cutting the cake.
That's
So
wonderful.
we've been best friends for this long. So I guess that part of the story solves for itself. But I think we
Okay.
were sitting and having a pint of beer at one of these microbrew pubs in Pune. And
Okay.
that's when the first idea of, let's make daru at home started. It was never to do, we never planned to do business. Uh,
Okay.
it was let's homebrew. And then
Mhm.
one thing led to the other, and I found myself on a flight between Brussels and Munich, a Lufthansa flight which carried an in-flight article, the magazine that nobody reads. So there was
That's
an
right.
article on London's first meadery, and
Okay.
Rohan and I both are history buffs. So I took a few pictures, and in the days of BlackBerry Messenger, BBM'd this little article down to Rohan.
Okay.
And by the time I came back to India, he had already bought some store-bought honey. He got like a glass carboy of 20 liters,
Okay.
and we used some baker's yeast to get the batch started. And Reddit was the recipe formulating platform. So we went on to Reddit and said, how do you make meat? Because meat sort of, when we started to research, it was like history meets mystery. It was, we both are history buffs. This was interesting. And
Okay.
one thing led to the other. And we had made like the first batch after 45 days. And then it tasted like shit. He said, I'll never make meat again. Uh, you can clearly see who the bully in this part of the relationship is. So we made more batches. And
Okay.
it reached that point where we kept making more and more at home. Again, there was never a business plan around this.
Okay.
It just came to a stage where I think there was a point in time when Rohan started to call his friends over. This is back in Pune, and give them a bottle and say, "What do you guys think?" And most friends will, humor you for the first time. Most friends will humor you for the second time, but then the third time they're like, "You know what? This is not working for me."
So is
But
it safe
I
to
think
say that
what
you were
we
drinking it?
Oh yeah, we were drinking quite a bit of it. It's
Okay.
the
Good to
cheapest way.
hear.
It was the cheapest way for us to get high.
Okay. All
So
right.
we kept making stuff and drinking our own stuff, drinking our own Kool-Aid. And we're thinking we're pretty kicked about the idea that, you could get away with spending so little and getting so high. So I think that was the starting point for our story. But I think there was a point where friends started to ask for more. And we had also discovered little nuances of manufacturing. Like we realized we need to temperature control the product. So we went to Junna Bazaar, bought a Coca-Cola fridge, discarded one, rigged the microcontrollers, fixed the cooling compressor, then started to temperature control the product. So the liquid had started to taste decent. And we started telling our friends to do barter. So we used to tell them to buy the honey and give it to us. And we would take the honey and turn that into alcohol and give it back to them.
Okay.
And then, that's when the first Kida struck, saying, why don't we buy the honey and make them pay a little more for it? So that little transition happened there. And then we suddenly were, for the sake of this conversation, this happened not in India, it happened in the US,
Okay.
but happened in the US. So
Okay.
we started to uh, literally bootleg the shit. So we were giving it to friends who were buying it from us, and a bunch of luxury holidays were financed in cash. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Listen. So it was essentially that, and it was somewhere down the line we started to realize that we questioned why our friends liked it, right? It was beyond the fact that they were our friends. I think what we realized very quickly was India likes sweeter products. That's where it started. Then soon we realized actually globally, if you look at it, the RTD is a category that's growing. And people like sweeter beverages. Like in India, people say it's a whiskey drinking nation, but we drink our whiskeys diluted with water or
Coca-Cola.
soda, or we add cola to it. So we, at the end of the day, as a nation, also drink sweeter beverages. Although cocktails is now suddenly starting to grow, but port wine has always been the highest selling wine in any winery in India. So
Okay.
somewhere down the line, you're starting to realize that sodas are being mixed with spirits. Stronger beers are preferred over mild beers, mainly because they're slightly sweeter and they also give you a good high, right?
Okay.
So uh, the more you research every category of alcohol, you realize that down to its core, it was less bitterness, a little more flavor, a little sweeter,
I see.
was sort of working, and we just felt mead. Came into that little sweet spot, pun intended,
I see.
and that's where the idea of trying to build a category came up. And like all typical entrepreneurs, we realized that in this space we realized the excise is your go-to authority. And till then, the only licensing we'd ever had with the government of India was RTO and passport office.
I see.
So we walked into excise office, with a letter in our hand saying we want to make meads. And we were shown the door saying, you can't make meads. Why? Because there is no law in India, in any state of India, that
Okay.
allows fermentation of honey. So we
Oh, I
said, so
see.
what's the
Okay.
obvious? So then we realized, because a lot of our laws have been written by the British in 1911,
Mm-hmm.
and mead never featured in that. So we realized that we've got to start from there, and we were. He's a great friend even today. He sort of guided us. He said, what, drop in a letter here, ask for this change, redraft the policy. So we actually helped the government draft the policy.
Okay.
And we reached the stage where Maharashtra, it took us about 3 years from the time we started, but Maharashtra state became the first state to pass a law that allows fermentation of honey.
Okay.
And very proudly, we say that now there are 7 states in India that have actually copied that law, where
Okay.
fermentation of honey is allowed. But Maharashtra was also smart enough to categorize us under wines, which allowed us to make in Maharashtra but sell everywhere else under the category of wine.
Okay.
And so when we got the law changed, we applied against that new law and for a permission, and then got the first license. So
Okay.
that's been the sort of journey that we went through. So it took us, we unlike most gin brands and beer brands who already have a category, and now you're trying to build a cool brand out of it. For us, it was
Okay.
first building this little category of mead and then building off that.
Okay. Okay. No, thank you. That's a very good insight into that. Also dovetails into my next question, which is kind of obvious about the perception of alcohol in Indian society at large.
Yep.
However, that perspective is slowly changing. What were the challenges, if any, that you encountered while in this journey, and how did you address them?
So the taboo still stays, right? So technically, I'm not sure if it is true, but I have read reports about India technically is a prohibition state.
Okay.
And laws were enacted. There's a nice 14-page argument that happened in the early 50s, where there were 4 gentlemen who were pushing India to actually have alcohol in them, because they said, this is the easiest way for the government to get revenues. And even now, our industry contributes to the second highest contributor to taxes and
Okay.
revenue for a state is the alcohol industry. And this is followed, it's first alcohol, first it's petroleum, and then there is alcohol. So
Okay.
thankfully, laws were enacted. So Bombay Prohibition Act, Delhi Prohibition Act, these acts were enacted later, which allowed states to sell alcohol. And in that is where the taboo comes in, right? The state wants you to increase revenue and does not want to give you any means to increase the revenue with. So
Okay.
there is nothing called ATL. There used to be ATL. We could go on television and go oola la 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 ole oh and sell Kingfisher.
Okay.
But I think that period has ended, and the only way you can sort of push a brand is through BTL channels. So that has a direct impact on the
For the
society
benefit
as
of
well.
of our viewers,
Okay,
what is
above
BTL?
the line and below the line. Above the line is where you're putting hoardings up. You can do television ads, you can do print ads.
Okay.
You can have QR codes on your bottles. Even that
Okay.
gets considered as above the line.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so below the line is when you can't do any of that, and the only way you can sort of get the product to go. And in the alcohol, in the Indian alcohol space, we call it LOL, right? LOL, which is liquid on lips. So the only way to get your product in is using the process of liquid on lips,
Okay.
sampling. And so the avenues that you have left with you is liquor stores and restaurants and events wherever they happen. So what essentially happens is when when you're constrained like this, the society sort of adapts around it. So yes, there is a taboo even today when it comes to alcohol. I have seen people taking offense in restaurants just because you've gone to approach them and you've spoken to them about alcohol and say, we don't drink. And we don't like that you've come and pushed alcohol at us. So this is a problem that is here to stay. It's not going to go. But increasingly, you're noticing that the new generation, that's the Gen Zs who are coming in, they don't want to be caught dead drinking a product that the Gen Xers like us have had or prior to us. I mean, our parents, they don't want to be caught holding the same brand of beverage. And what happens, therefore, is a new phenomenon where a person walks up to a shop and literally asks, "To naya kya hai?" Right? This is something that we never did when we were kids. Like when we were kids, when I say kids, we were 21. When we walk up to a bar, we just pick up what we find.
Got it.
But in these days, the conversation at a restaurant, at a retail store is a lot different because of the number of consumer brands, the number of D2C brands that have come in. So
Oh,
people
I see.
are
Okay.
aware of an alternative to an existing incumbent uh, in the market, and they're aggressively asking for it. And that is where we as a brand sort of start sticking out.
I
Uh,
see.
and that has changed. So now what we have realized is day drinking is something that's slowly coming into focus. Surprisingly, the new generation does not want to get as drunk as we used to get when we were younger. And these little changes have
100%.
started to chip away on a rather rigid society.
I see.
People are talking about ingredients in the product a lot more now. Once upon a time, it was, it was all about softer, uh, you know, dosti number one, and things which are a lot more softer. Now people are talking about 12 botanicals and all natural products. So the consumer is changing slowly in the metros, and
I see.
when it changes in the metros, it slowly and steadily over the next 1 decade percolates into the smaller towns and cities. And like I've always said this to people, America discovered craft beer in the early 90s with the advent of Sam Adams, right? Before
Okay.
Sam Adams, it was Budweiser all through and through. And even now, Sam Adams, which is one of the largest craft breweries in America, has got about, I think, 1% or less than 1% market share. But
Okay.
there are 6,000 more breweries that you can choose from.
Mhm.
Now in India, and then over the next 1 decade or decade and a half, people went from flavor to health, and now seltzers is sort of tooling the route. Bud Light was doing quite well. Again, on the banks of lower calorie and more health. Now in
Mhm.
India, we are where flavor story has just started. Like Bira
I see.
came
Yeah.
in, broke the market, and said, there's a flavorful beverage in place. Society started to pick it up because it was less bitter. Wheat beers are a lot easier to drink. And
Mhm.
then people like us got a chance to sort of ride on those coattails and approach a society that was now willing to move away from the older alcohols. And we see the transition to health happening, I think, in the next 5 to 7 years.
I see.
So for now, I think there's a big market. Society is looking for better alternatives. The
Mhm.
new generation is definitely is, and we are chipping away against that problem of the society and addressing that target market.
Oh, wonderful. So, see, India recently became the biggest population in the world. So, there's already a big market that you have. But from what I understand, you also have international ambitions. So, how do you see the potential outside of India? What countries are you targeting? How do the flavors there differ from what the Indian palate is? And what are your plans? How are you going about it?
So I mean, we are right now available in Dubai, Australia, and New Zealand. Those are the
Okay,
three
wonderful.
markets.
Okay.
Dubai is where we are seeing a decent amount of traction that has already started to build up,
And is there a
mainly
reason,
because
a particular reason for that?
so I think Middle East has a very close affinity to honey. If you walk into any large space in Middle East,
Yeah,
honey
yeah.
is
Understood.
quintessentially there. So
Mhm.
since we're made out of all natural honey, that's one reason why we find an audience picking us up. Second, it's
Yeah.
also sort of a melting spot of cultures, right? Dubai's got folks coming in from Europe, from Africa, from America, and from Asia. And
Mhm.
what that has given us is a collection of folks from the Commonwealth regions, because the way we make our meats, it's very close to a cider. It's got a very ciderisk taste, though it's
Okay.
less sweeter than a cider.
Okay.
And
That's good.
this set of audiences have actually seen a cider, have tasted a cider in the past. So there is a tick when it comes to the palate feel that they want. And what the last sort of thing that's also working in these countries is they care about what goes into the liquid now, because I won't call them more evolved, but I say they're more aware. We are still, like I said, we are still at the stage of discovering flavor. They have gone beyond that. This little audience now has gone towards health. They're worried about what goes into their, and all natural fruits, all natural honey is something that resonates. And what we are, however, also pushing very hard is the concept of sustainability, because we call ourselves the most sustainable form of the category, not moonshine, but mead is the
Okay.
most sustainable form of alcohol you will ever find. Right? You're
Hmm.
not telling the farmer not to grow a certain crop, like a food crop, and grow grape or barley against it. You can tell the
Hmm.
farmer to grow whatever the hell he or she wants. And by putting up a bee box, you're bumping up the yield, you're bumping up the quality of the yield, and you're giving the farmer a secondary source of income by buying back the honey. So
Hmm.
that's the step one. And the second part is, when you produce meat, you don't heat anything. And everything that you use can be pumped back into a field, and it actually makes the field fertile because we compost the fruits. The spent honey, the lees as we call it, is rich in nutrients. We in fact talking to folks to make that into cattle fodder. So
Okay.
all in all, if you look at it, the product is a very sustainable form of product of alcohol, and that is something that's resonating with the folks in Europe and Americas who are all sitting in Dubai. So for us to enter the other markets like Europe and Americas and
Okay.
try and get our footing there, getting Dubai right is very critical. So Dubai is something I am personally focusing a lot on,
Okay. Okay.
and Australia and New Zealand mainly Commonwealth countries. So
Mhm.
there is a culture that we are trying to. It's going to take longer because there are more competitors there.
Okay.
But
The supply
we
chains are
believe,
longer.
yeah, supply chains are longer. But I think what we have is super exotic fruits, and what we try and do is we send those kind of SKUs which have like an Indian-esque to it. So mango chili, we send that because we know nobody else can pull off a good mango chili. So we
Okay.
send that down there,
Okay.
and hoping that that sort of is the Trojan horse before they start picking up other meats. That
I see. I see. So we have a question. The first question from the community here: how does mead compare with substitutes in terms of health, and does it have more sugar versus beer? Let's.
okay. So the
I think it
answer
was
to this,
before we go
uh,
into the sustainability angle, deep dive into that.
let's talk.
This might be a good
Let's
question to
talk
answer.
about health. I'll start with alcohol drinking is injurious to health.
Okay.
Don't drink and drive. So, having said that, I'll answer the second question first. Does it have more sugars versus beer? Uh, a certain amount of alcohol, no, we have lesser sugars as compared to beers.
I think.
However, the calories that we leave behind is a function of the amount of alcohol percentage in our product. So a typical, what they call in India, mild beer is below 5% alcohol. And so if you compare alcohol percentage to alcohol percentage, we are lower. But if you make, since our meads are at about 6.5% alcohol, we pack about 160 calories, whereas a beer packs about 130. But if we do alcohol to alcohol comparison, we are at about 120 versus a beer at about 140.
I
Where
see.
it does uh, sort of have an edge when it comes to health, and I say this with a lot of caveats, right? It's alcohol. At the end of the day, it is injurious. Is that we are gluten free, so there is no gluten in our product. The other thing is we pack more antioxidants per pint than a glass of red wine. And because of the process that we follow at Moonshine in particular, where we ferment the honey and turn that into alcohol, and then we re-sweeten the product partially with honey again, raw honey, and we don't pasteurize the product. Uh,
Okay.
the honey in itself has antibacterial properties, which is also there in the mead when we get done when the product is finally ready, and they're all active antibacterial properties. So we didn't know this at all up to about 6 months back. I was telling this to Akshat also a couple of weeks back. We figured this out because we were doing some research. The University of Copenhagen is doing a research on our meats in particular. Uh, and they came back to us and told us the story is about both antioxidants and antibacterial properties. Uh, and which is where sort of the goodness of honey. So we keep telling them that 12 teaspoons of honey go into making a pint of Moonshine's mead, and 10 turns into alcohol, 2 stay back for taste. So that's the amount of residual sweetness that you'll get.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, wonderful. How, in terms of health, you've answered that question very well. Thank you. Let's move on to your work with the bee, what you call the bee hotels and the University of Copenhagen. Could you speak a little bit about that?
So, so we started with the idea of introducing flavorful beverages to India, right? For us, we just wanted to create nostalgia in a bottle. So we have salted kokum and grilled pineapple. The guava chili will taste like namak, mirchi, peru that you buy from the road. And we use
Okay.
actual fruit. So we buy about 150 kilos of guavas. We pick it up from mandis. We'll wash it, chop it, macerate it, throw it into the tank. And that's how our flavors are produced. We don't add artificial flavors and nutrients. And we believe that was the purpose why we exist, just to make flavorful beverages that you can identify. However, over time, we started to buy more honey. And when I say more honey, we set out a mission to consume at least 2 tons of honey a month.
Okay.
That was a promise we made to the state. Today, we consume about 10 tons of honey a month, and we are growing on this volume. And we started to talk to beekeepers now because there's something that you buy from aggregators. We have our own boxes. We have about 600 of our own boxes, bee boxes. But again, we also now started to talk to beekeepers who would reach out to us and saying, I've got 300 kilos of honey. No, but no aggregator wants to buy it. Will you buy it from me? And when you started to dig deeper, chip away on this part of the problem, you start realizing that in India, we don't have much consumption of honey. I mean, we have about, I
Interesting.
believe about 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. We have about 25, 30 people on this call. And I'm sure at least 50% of us would have a jar of honey sitting in our kitchens that we clean the lid off before we use it, because that's how little we use it in our honey in our daily lives. And that pretty much translates to how much we consume. We consume 30 grams per capita, whereas the global average is 700 grams per capita. And you don't even poorer nations in Africa consume 20 grams per day. We, for some reason, despite having a sweet tooth, we have let sugars dominate the sweetness, the ingredient that adds the sweetness to our foods. And we've forgotten how to use honey in our products. And what essentially happens there is beekeepers don't have avenues to therefore sell, which forces them to sell products at a lower rate than their costs, pushing them out of business. And as a nation, we end up exporting almost 70,000 tons of honey, and we barely consume anything. And what's been happening in the process is the industry in India, the agricultural industry, the more monocropping we do, the more bees we require for cross-pollination. And that's not enough. So people are now using toothbrushes and paintbrushes to do cross-pollination. So all these little pieces of information has suddenly taken us to this crossroads where should we continue the journey of just being flavorful, or should we actually start building a purpose around why we exist, around the bee in itself, right? And how do we find a way to have people consume more honey in India by just making meats? Because by forward integrating honey into alcohol, we are doing about 25x in terms of increase in value of honey. And because of this kind of a jump, we can actually buy honey at much higher rates than what a typical beekeeper would sell it at. And this is what has now become the purpose of our brand. Now, as a brand, we exist to service the little bee. It may be a honey bee, it may be a non-honey bee. And what we do as a business is we try and we talk more about consuming honey. So if you guys buy 12 pints of meats between friends and consume it, you've just helped consume 1 kilo of honey, which otherwise in your house, half a kilo jar takes a year to consume. And the more you consume, the more we get to buy. And the more we get to buy, the more beekeepers are there in the world, in our country. So that's one part of the honeybee problem. But from a solitary bee, which I also mentioned just now, there is honeybee and non-honeybees. The non-honeybees are the solitary bees. They don't live in hives. They don't produce honey. Technically, we don't think they add any value to our lives, but they actually contribute to over 90% of the cross-pollination for food crops in India and flowering that you see in the cities.
Oh, wow.
And out of 720, 730 varieties of bees in the country, 5 are honeybees. Everybody else is and amongst those honeybees, the most aggressive honeybee is the chhajja bee that you see in your houses. Right? The rest of the solitary bees are very quiet. They live on their own. They lay their eggs, and they go about their daily lives. And their ecosystem is getting more and more impacted because of the urbanization that's happening, because they live in crevices in the walls and trees and stuff. So the less of those and more of plastic facades that you see in the scaffoldings that you see in buildings, the lesser they have places to stay. So as a business, what we have also now pivoted to is working for those people. It sort of helps us get the marketing story out as well. But Moonshine Honey Project as a brand was born mainly to push good honey to consumers at a lower price, but also to sort of work with these with these solitary bees. And we're setting up something called bee hotels. We wanted to call it Airbnb, but our lawyer said we are not going to protect you if Airbnb comes and slaps a case on you. So we just went with bee hotels. It's a very small little structure that we're going to soon start selling on our website for you people to buy, or for bars to pick up and keep them, and they become homes for bees, these solitary bees, which otherwise don't have homes. And in places in the West, this has already been mandated by the government. You need to have bricks with holes in them for them to live in. So there's a lot that is happening around the world. I think in India, it's been a little slower, but our goal is to hit about 1 million or a little more than 1 million over the next 2 years of these bee boxes. We have deployed 100 as a part of the first story, but we will slowly and steadily keep adding more of these, and we will talk more about these in the days to come. So the purpose has moved from making booze to actually doing something for the environment. The booze is just the sexy front that is going to help push our cause.
Okay. Now, keeping track of time, I'd like to move on to other topics, but we have a very quick question from Abhinav Gupta here. What are the bottlenecks currently related to raw materials as well as processing? If you could quickly touch upon
No
that, please.
bottlenecks when it comes to raw material. India has surplus honey. In fact, most of our beekeepers don't know what to do with it. Chhattisgarh government reached out to us last month with 200 tons of honey, and they don't know how to get rid of it. So we have plenty of good honey. I think the bottleneck is if you're going to convert this into mead, consumption is always the bottleneck. So it either consumes as raw honey or as an or you forward integrate the honey into different forms of foods, or you turn it into booze. So I think consumption is the real bottleneck. It's not the raw material at all.
So are you saying Indians are not drinking enough mead?
I would love to say that.
Okay, what about the consistency and quality? Abhinav, we'll take this question. If you don't mind, we will answer this question offline for you. Just keeping track of time, I'd like to move on to the next topic. So, the elephant in the room, so to say, you were on Shark Tank, season 1, and you are a legend over there. So, Nitin, for the folks who don't know, Nitin got an all-shark deal, and like a boss, walked away without accepting it. So, Nitin, could you speak a little more about that? What was the thought process? What went into the decision making, and was Shark Tank even a utility for you?
Shark Tank helped us so at the end of the day, your performance marketing. What I've learned from Shark Tank is that your performance marketing and all of that kept aside, television still rules.
Okay.
And the kind of brand awareness you can build through television, I don't think there are very few avenues outside of that gives you that kind of range.
Okay.
So Shark Tank did a great job with that, and that was one of the primary motives. I think we got called out quite ungracefully there on the show as well. We are an alcohol brand. We can't do hoardings. We can't do any of that, like I said at the beginning. So this essentially serviced that.
Okay.
We were still open to the idea of taking a deal, but then the proposals were preposterous. I mean, the counters that we got and the number that we'd asked for, we were expecting them to probably discount it by about 15-20%, which is 30% also, which is what they were doing for most people.
Mm-hmm.
When they discounted by 65-70%, we realized they were the ones who wanted to crack the joke before us. So we just played along. And, but again, having said that, if you guys have consumer brands, please, by all means, go to Shark Tank, because I think that's one of the best, fastest, and the easiest platforms to get your message out. So for me, the conversation with a bar or a restaurant or a retail used to be, I have a mead is made out of fermented honey. Change to, this is a mead, my brand's name is Moonshine, these are the components. So the the introduction piece completely vanished because everybody's watching Shark Tank. And I think with India, because of OTT, it's not a one time spike. You see, it goes up and it's a plateau for a while. You see people are constantly discovering you on OTT, and it helps brands message get around. So I think Shark Tank is a great platform if you want to get the messaging or get some marketing out of it, for sure.
Okay.
Capital,
what are the other marketing channels? So there might be folks in our audience who are in a similar business. What are the other marketing channels that you use?
Restaurants, retail, and it's about retail. It's about just keeping the product visible. That's the only thing you can do.
That's the only thing.
But I think it's in restaurants and events is where I think our classmate Akshat, Hardik Zaveri, right? He is been in Colgate since B school days. I recently had a chat with him last month. He was down at the Meadery, and he said I tried to try to cut the data in every sort of way to see what kind of performance marketing will help me push a new form of toothpaste out into the market. And the cheapest and the most effective solution I still found was old school sampling, right? And that same story holds good for us. The more we sample the product to consumers, the more we get liquid on lips. It's our marketing is divided into 3 parts, right? The first part is getting the product to a shelf. The second part is you discovering it on the shelf, and the third part of marketing happens after you open the bottle. What you can control is the last one, and the first 2 is what you're constantly gaming on. So my job is to get that product to you and ensure the product is consistent and tasty, and so you come back for the product. And the
Okay.
easiest way to do that is getting just old school sampling. That's the only way you can move the product. Old school sampling in restaurants, not in
If you
retail.
may, about the consistency, does your bee, honeybee, or honey quality consistency also impact
No,
the quality? So you've
we
attuned
we
your
don't we
process.
don't have, our product is not consistent, and I'm very proud about it. The day we say our product is consistent, then we are mass producing something, and we are finding shortcut means to make the product taste like a mass produced product. Craft, before the war, craft was something which was the way of life. Liquid, our product is completely dependent on agriculture and the climate. If
Okay.
the flowering changes, honey changes, the alcohol will change. The fruits will change. The type of fruit every year changes. The product will change. There is a 3-4% variation from batch to batch.
I
If
see.
you have an older batched product, you will be able to make out the difference. But because you'll be having it over such a large period of time, the guava chili is a very seasonal product. You will
Mhm.
not make out the difference. But with the traditional meat, of course, you will make out some difference. But that's something that we wear on our sleeves. We don't want to keep the product consistent. If you're trying to
That's
make it consistent, then
good
I'm
to hear.
cutting corners.
Okay. Okay. And what's the shelf life of mead?
Technically, on paper, as per FSI, it is 18 months,
Okay.
18 to 20 months, 18 to 24 months. But you don't need to have. You can keep the meat for as long as you want. The product tends to survive time. It actually gets better with time, even inside a bottle. And that's, by the way, one of the researches that the University of Copenhagen is currently working on. So, trying to understand how that works.
I see. I see. We have another question here pertaining to our previous
Shark Tank.
discussion. Can you please share what the impact of being on Shark Tank? How was the hike in demand when the pitch went out?
I have seen, so in our case, it's very hard to measure that, Anurag, because we don't have anything that is online. Everything is offline, and our show literally peaked during the Omicron virus episode. But what we did see was, let me put it this way, right? Since the last 3 years, we as a business have been growing over 100% year on year. And post Shark Tank in particular, we saw this at least 150% spike in the next following summer season. I think we came out in Jan. The April, May, June was almost 150% increase over the previous year.
Wow.
But was that purely because of Shark Tank? It's a no. But definitely the word of mouth increased. My width of distribution grew by about 75 to 80% within a span of 2-3 weeks, which, by the way, I would completely attribute that to Shark Tank.
Okay. Okay. Well, wonderful. So we're coming towards the close of our session here. So, uh, can you share some memorable or interesting anecdotes through the journey? Some challenges, of course. What are the typical challenges in this business so people can learn from you and in their own entrepreneurial journeys?
Uh, I think one memorable experience was the first time we ever dispatched to Bombay. Uh, for those of you who know Bombay, Heiko was the first supermarket and the first shop that ever kept us. This is at Hiranandani, Powai. And the condition was that I need to stand in there. I had a full beard in those days, so they had asked me to shave, and I had to be the boys pushing the brand. And I did that for about 2 weekends on a trot, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 12 hours a day. And I remember there was one person who came in the second weekend of my stint there, and she came with a photograph on the phone, and she said, there is this product that I bought last time. Do you have it? And that was for us, I think, the first sort of validation that the product will work,
Okay.
and that sort of helped push the brand forward. So that was, I think, answering your most memorable occasion. But I think one thing that I know is don't be scared to keep tweaking your product, especially if it's a consumer product. The consumer is fairly vocal, only if you care to listen. So we started with and a very Scandinavian minimalistic design on our label.
Okay.
But I think, and because we believe that consumers are like us, 35 plus, 30 plus, and looking for have traveled the world and looking for a flavorful experience in India. And therefore are willing to pay, something like 220. And again, our classmate Karthik Rajendran had told that we all agreed on that number, that 220 will work in India because this crowd can afford 220. What I learned was a younger audience can also afford 220 because gone are the days when people are trying to save up at the end of every month.
I
We
see.
were
Okay.
taught the habit of 30% bachana hai. Well, that
Uh-huh.
concept is dead now. So
Oh,
we suddenly realized that we had to change our logo, our makeup, our brands, messaging, and we went to a more funky sort of branding that you see on my shirt as well. We went and we had to change our entire branding, and we changed it within 14, 16 months of starting. And that is only because we were constantly listening. And when I say we, it means Rohan and I were constantly listening to consumers. We have spent hours and nights sitting in bars and restaurants and retail just watching consumer behavior. So don't feel scared to sort of take a step back and change things, because it's never too late to make a change. I think that's one thing, and keep listening to consumers. We tweaked our product also quite a bit, basis feedback.
okay.
So, and
Wonderful.
that's sort of now part of the process that we follow.
So, how do you see the future for mead? Of course, you would say that yeah, it is going to grow, and we really do hope so. But what role do you think Moonshine Meadery is going to play in the growth and popularity of mead in India
So I'll be very honest. While we
and
sought out to
sustainability? I
build,
must.
we sought out to build out a category of mead, but over time we've realized that mead is an afterthought to most consumers when they choose us. People don't even know they're drinking mead till we go tell them, which is why
Okay.
we dropped the word meadery from the front of the label, and we've moved the definition to the back of the label, because we want people to pick up the beverage because they're looking for familiar fruits and a tasty beverage. So
Okay.
people buy us for that reason. After they sip us, they turn our bottle, and then they realize they're drinking fermented honey. So having said that, I think we will see more brands coming in. Till there are more brands, mead as a category will always remain small. But we have also slightly pivoted from trying to sell mead to trying to sell moonshine.
I
Sort
see.
of a Xerox versus photocopying story. You rather build out Xerox and then have others discover photocopying and start pushing the category up. So while I would love mead as a category to grow, I think moonshine as a standalone brand is growing faster.
I
Uh,
see.
and uh, the what we are, however, doing to stay close to the mead category is working with the bee, and working with sustainability and bee as our sort of, and moonshine honey project's job is to sort of make bee great again.
Okay.
That's the way we're pushing that. But I think as a category, uh, I think it's a very, very tough place to be in if you're trying to only build a category, because then you'll be the only one trying to do so, and others are not doing that. And
Okay.
so Sula became big, and then wines became big. So
Uh-huh.
we are going to try and follow the same route where moonshine becomes big, and therefore meats become popular.
Right. So, in that context, what is the next step for business on the business front, on the growth front for Moonshine Meatery? Are you looking to raise more capital? What is your strategy going forward?
So we just received a round of funding. It came in two parts, and we're about to announce the investor very soon.
Okay.
But I think we are well sorted for at least another year and a half minimum. And
Okay.
we've been we've been running a dhanda before Ashni Grover made dhanda word. So we've never burnt too much. We've been very conscious about how much we burn as a business. We like the category, both Rohan and I, we enjoy the space. So we want to be here for a while. And therefore, we will be chipping away at the existing markets to begin with. So I think we barely scratch the surface. So for the next maybe a year and a half, we will only double down on Maharashtra, Karnataka, Goa, and we've just launched Haryana, so Gurgaon. And
I see.
just get deeper into these markets. There's a lot to be done there. And
Mhm.
when you have limited funds, you deploy that fund very carefully. And in markets like Dubai, it's a great market because it gives you a chance to do a cash and carry, and it gives
Okay.
you good cash flows. And that's one of the main reasons. And it also gives you access to this one audience, which if you click there, then it's very easy to make an inroad into Europe. So
Yeah.
Europe and Africa. So that's where for the next 1.5 years, you'll only see us working on these specific areas and focusing heavily on the marketing front, using the bee hotels and urban beekeeping as our sort of uh, uh, the coattails that we'll be riding on. But these
Okay.
are the main things that we will be doing. We won't be trying to do too many new things. I think mead itself is new enough a thing for people to digest.
I see.
So we'll do
Sure.
few things, but we'll do few things well and consistently and a lot of. That's the way we do.
First principle, very good. So Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Goa are your top places. Gurgaon. If you had a top city, as have been asked in the questions here, which are the top cities in India for consumption of meat?
Bangalore and Mumbai.
Bangalore and Mumbai.
Yeah, they're the
Okay.
biggest.
Okay.
Bombay is the most expensive.
Okay.
Real estate space is expensive. Shelf space is expensive. Schemes are crazy. So Mumbai is the most expensive market for an alcohol brand because licenses haven't been issued after 91. So the number of licenses are in short supply. They get sold for a premium, and therefore
Okay.
they ask for the pound of flesh if you want to be there. If you want to be listed in that shop. But consuming population, you can't beat Bangalore. I think Bangalore is right up there, after which Mumbai and Gurgaon come as a close second and third.
Okay. Okay. You talked about funding. So let me also touch upon the unit economics, contribution margin. If you want to share that, fixed investments needed, there would be a setup costs, supply chain costs also. If you're producing here in one location, distributing all across the country, and now in so many other parts of the globe. So could you shed some light on that?
I'll briefly touch on some points here, right? So fixed investment, we as a company did a fixed investment of about 6.5 crores.
Okay.
A sizable amount, and that's mainly because we were the first category builders and there was nobody else to go and do contract manufacturing with. So we set up the entire place, but in hindsight, it's a great thing because we are able to control our costs a lot better. Contribution margins are, it again differs from state to state. You have to understand there are 25 states in India that have excise policies to sell alcohol, and every state policy is very different. Your taxation, your VAT can be from 0% VAT to 120% VAT, 200 actually. So there is no fixed number, but what we generally try and do is we hover within a range of 45 to 75% contribution margin. Depends on which state you're playing in. And cost of product is the cost of product is not very high, especially when you're buying large volumes. You can make a good pint of meat for 30 rupees, right? Packaging and product included. Post which, of course, there is the cost of marketing, the cost of fixed costs that come with it, and the cost of distribution. Again, the cost of distribution varies from state to state. India has 3 models. One is a government distribution model. There is a state distribution. There is a private distribution model, and then there's a hybrid model between the two. Depending on which state you service, the entire the cost of supply chain changes completely, and that's where that's why people don't like to enter this industry. It's a complicated industry. But if the shittiest framework we were taught Akshat during our B school days, the Porter's 5 Forces is held as a mirror to this. The barriers to entry. This is like a large ass barrier to entry. Government and the laws that every state has a different law. You got to learn those laws.
Oh well, kudos to you for having navigated such a complicated business over and
continuous navigating, Akshat,
navigating. Pardon me. And all strength to you. We'd love to keep in touch and see where this goes. Would love to see you in Europe as well, and try some mead when we meet in India or elsewhere in the world. So, unless there are other questions from the audience here, I'd like to thank Nitin for his time, and thank you all for taking the time to join us here on a Sunday morning. And let's drink a little more mead and make bees great again.